are spiritual. They're even what I call spiritually curious. And I know this because anytime I'm with a crowd of people and they find out that I'm a pastor, they ask me questions about the spiritual realm. They ask me questions about what is behind the proverbial veil between this world and the next. People of no faith, people of different faiths, people of the Christian faith, it doesn't make any difference. Once they hear that I might know a little something about what's behind the curtain, people start to ask. And there are millions of people like that. And yes, outside the church, there are a few who are staunchly atheistic to the point of being militant about it. No one's going to convince them there is a God unless God does it himself. But I would tell you that the vast majority of the world, our neighbors and the people in this state and this country, crave a connection with God. And it begins with this curiosity, this wanting to know more, to see if it's real. But the issue is this: there are objections, there are barriers, there are even walls that limit people's spiritual curiosity. It isn't the concept of God, that people have a problem with. Most of the time it's us that they have a problem with. Many of you have probably heard the quote by the Hindu leader Mahatma Gandhi, who was the one who promoted nonviolent resistance for India's independence. And it is the same model that Martin Luther King Jr. used in terms of civil rights. But Gandhi said this: "I like your Christ, but I do not like your Christians. Your Christians are so unlike your Christ." It just reminds me that we sometimes get in the way of the message. We get in the way of the love of God when we rail against people, when we act hateful or we condemn others and so on. I mean, you've heard me say this hundreds of times. Christianity is all about relationship. And if we can't engage the world in a spiritual conversation because we are a barrier unto people, then we got to address it. I'm not saying that it's just us or that it's us all the time, but to anyone it applies to within the Christian church. I mean, we hinder the message of God. He's entrusted it to us. He's asked us to share it, and we hinder it by rushing to judgment against people who do not subscribe to our way of living. It's hard to expect people to be like Jesus when they don't even know Jesus. I mean, that would be like getting on a plane right now and going to Singapore. And flying to Singapore, once we've landed, we've decided that, it's been a long flight and, that we've been sleeping and we got morning breath and all that kind of stuff. So we want to freshen up and we reach into our pocket or our purse and we pull out a stick of gum and we start chewing a flavorful mint gum to freshen our breath as we go through customs. But the minute we get off the plane, we are promptly questioned by police and ticketed, if not arrested, for chewing gum without a doctor's prescription. And possibly arrested for importing a banned substance into the country. Gum is illegal in Singapore, unless you have a doctor's note. But if you didn't know that coming into the country, you might be in for a surprise. Why would we be surprised? Because it's not how life is lived here on this side of the ocean. You can chew as much gum as you want and buy it pretty much everywhere. Well, the same is true. We can't expect people to know what God is like and what God wants before they get to know God. And second, they can't even get to know God because we become a barrier to that very message. Now, Paul in the New Testament, as I read earlier to you, was clear about what he was all about. He was heading back to Jerusalem. It was the home church at that time. It wasn't Rome, it was Jerusalem. And he was saying goodbye to a group of elders in the church of Ephesus, probably his favorite people. And he had started that church, mentored those people, and he was saying goodbye, and he says this to them, and it's on the front of the bulletin this morning. He says, "However, I consider my life worth nothing to me if I only may finish the race and complete the task of the Lord Jesus Christ has given me, the task of testifying to the gospel of God's grace." He says, the only thing that matters to me is being able to tell others about the love of God. That's it. So that's the only thing that matters. He even goes so far as he says, I am innocent of any man's blood, meaning he's saying, I have told everyone that would listen to me, and so no one will face judgment if they spent time listening to me, because that's all I would talk about. He senses in this speech that he gives to these people that his life is about to get a lot worse, and he is convinced that he'll never see these people again, and he reminds them that even in hard times, he is single-minded about telling others about Jesus. I mean, Paul is near the end of his pastoring days, and he was still telling people about Jesus any way he could. And he was right, by the way. He got back to Jerusalem. He was promptly arrested. They wanted to try him for causing riots and disturbing the peace, which he really wasn't doing. The Roman authorities actually took him into custody to keep the chief priests from killing him the way they killed Jesus, and then they put him on trial. And so Paul defends himself in front of the Roman governor and the king, one of the Herods, one of the kings of Israel, and all he does in his testimony is tell them about Jesus in his life. And by the end of his defending his case, the king says to Paul, because he's the judge, he says, do you think that in such a short amount of time you could persuade me to be a Christian? So even in his trial, he's telling others about Jesus, and Paul replies to this. He says, short time or long, I pray God that not only you, but everyone who's listening to me today may become what I am. And then he adds, except for the chains, because he was arrested. Except for the chains, I hope you become a Christian. And this is just one example that during his trial, he would share the love of Jesus to his accusers and to his judge. Now, when Paul talked to people, it wasn't a one-size-fit-all kind of testimony or message. He knew, depending on who he talked to, he might have to adjust how he talked to them. He knew how to connect with people, in other words, to establish a relationship, a common bond, so that people would listen to him. How do we know this? Because he talks about this in 1 Corinthians. He says, to those not having the law, I became like one not having the law, though I'm not free from God's law, but under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. That means non-Jewish people. He says, to the weak I became weak to win the weak. I've become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some, and he means God might save some. I do this all for the sake of the gospel, for the good news. I'm just here to tell people, and wherever you're at in life, I will meet you in that place to talk to you about Jesus. You don't have to come to my level. I will go to your level. He engaged people where they lived, and he didn't shoot from the hip like a Clint Eastwood Western. I mean, people have preconceived notions about what we do here on a Sunday morning. They can't see what we're up to. I mean, we're inside the building here. It makes people a little nervous. Add to that the judgmental things that the media-savvy Christian leaders say outside the church and on TV, and all of a sudden, people may be receptive to God, but they're not so sure about the church and the people who belong to the church. And if you doubt me, go to the next slide, would you please, Rick? This was a picture taken yesterday in Las Vegas. It was taken by a friend of mine who is a part of a church, and they were at a parade, and the church was in the parade, and this person was standing on the side of the road giving an ultimatum to possibly spiritually curious people wondering about God, and there's someone with a sign. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I look at a sign like that, and I ask myself the question, would I want to go to the church that he goes to? And I will tell you, without a doubt, my answer is no. I don't want to go to a church where people go out being that confrontational with people. That scares people away. If you didn't know that, you may think that's a witness, but that scares people. My friend went up to him and invited him to their church, which is nothing like putting up signs, by the way. Matter of fact, the pastor of the church that took that picture was the pastor that married Rachel and myself. Here's why that sign doesn't work with people who are not inside the church. It doesn't lead with love. It does not promote relationship or even conversation. It either scares someone into submission, which is very unlikely, by the way, And God isn't into scaring people, so it's flawed. Or two, it shuts people down and makes people stay far away, which is much more likely. A few of those signs, and people like that, and all of a sudden, all of us have a credibility problem. And people start to think we're all like that. And then guess what? We have a preconceived notion of what all church people are like. Preconceived notions can harm everyone, even if we are not like that. And I want to show you another video this morning, and what you're going to see is somebody going through their life, and you're going to see little thought bubbles of the preconceived notions that they have when people ask him questions about different things, including going to church. Let's watch this morning. This is him going into work.
Oh, hey, Kevin, you want some coffee? 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 I love coffee. You want some coffee? Coffee? Coffee?
No, that's okay. I'm gonna get myself a bottle of water.
Hey man, I have a couple college bros coming up Saturday to play some tackle football. Want to join us? Want to join us? Tackle football. You going down.
No, sorry man, I can't. I've got a funeral on Saturday I gotta go to. Hey Courtney, accounting sent me up to make sure these get shredded. I'm guessing there's something illegal.
Yeah, probably. Oh, hey, Kevin, I was going to ask you, we're doing something really cool at my church this Sunday, and I was wondering if you'd want to join us. Join us.
Hey, how's it going? Here's your coffee.
Sunday? I got some things. This is your church?
Hey, how's it going?
Man, this place is great. So, like, normal people go to church? I can actually see myself coming back. So, what time's the service? And what do you think about getting there early?
Go one more. There we go. You know, we got to shred people's preconceived notions. Because I think, for the most part, I think we're normal, right? We're everyday folks. I mean, but we've been called to go on a mission. In other words, we have a job to do as Christians. Now think about that word mission for a moment outside the context of the church. Whenever you hear the word mission, not talking about church, it's usually something difficult. A CIA agent goes on a secret mission, it's difficult. NASA sends an astronaut into space on a space mission, hard. The Marines have a mission to secure the beachhead, it's hard. I'm not trying to scare you off, but all missions have challenges. But yet, as those inside the church, we are on a mission that God has commanded us to just share our faith. I'm not even asking you to share your faith at this point. All I'm asking you to do is to invite someone to church in a couple of weeks. Very non-confrontational way. As a matter of fact, in 2 weeks, on that Back to Church Sunday, which is the 21st, and I talked about it 2 weeks ago, I talked about it last week, I talked about it this week, Doug's going to talk about it next week. I'm going to preach a sermon on the 21st, and the title of the sermon is this: Why Jesus? I'm just going to talk about the importance of Jesus in the life of a Christian. Nothing confrontational, nothing hateful, just why Jesus. And so if somebody wants to hear why we believe what we believe, that's what I'm going to talk about. We have a mission. Matter of fact, the mission that Jesus puts us on is the only thing that is going to last in all of our lives. Think about that. Our careers don't last. Our hobbies don't last. Our trophies don't last. Our resume does not last. Even our degrees on our wall do not last. They don't last for eternity. Matter of fact, our house and our car and everything else, I go on and on. These things do not last. The only thing that's going to last forever is our relationships. Period. Our relationships have eternal ramification. It's the only thing on this planet that lasts forever. And that's why going on a mission is so extremely important. It is the greatest privilege to be able to invite people to church to hear about the love of Jesus. Because someday in heaven, when all the temporary stuff is gone, all that's left are people and God. Relationships. That's it. That's all that's left. I mean, the only way that the church continues to get its message move forward is the same thing that's used in business. Word of mouth. It's better than money towards advertising. It surpasses any media campaign. Word of mouth advertising is good for a business, and it's good for the church. And by the way, that's also our mission, is to introduce people to the church when they hear about the love of God. I mean, the Bible doesn't tell us that we need to convince people of a religion. It doesn't say attract them to a philosophy. It doesn't say convert them even to a doctrine. It says invite people. Introduce them to Jesus. Once again, it's about relationships. I mean, in the Bible, people brought people to Jesus all the time. Sick people, blind people, lonely people, worried people. They brought children, depressed people, worried people, stressed out people, and even weird people. All they did was bring people to Jesus. And I'm going to tell you, you don't have to know anything. You don't have to be a theologian. You don't have to understand everything in the Bible. All you have to know is that if your life is better because you come to this church, you just want to share that with someone else so that maybe they can get what you already have. And quite possibly, someday, someone might say this to you, possibly even in heaven, by the way. Thank you for pestering me over and over again. Even though I kept saying no, you were breaking down my defenses, and later on in my life, when we were no longer in contact, someone else invited me to something at their church, and I finally said yes. But without you asking me so many times, I would have never been ready to say yes then. It's our mission. To love others enough to tell them about Jesus. And it's not about the answer. That's not the success rate here. It's not the answer they give. It is in the invitation.